can be taken but not given. It is the process of taking which is empowerment in itself. This is Matt Pearce. Welcome back to part two. We just continue our little chat about the de facto referendum, and we were just talking about the thinking about who would run, whether the five lawmakers would run again or pass it on, whether they should or not. And am I right in saying that the by-elections won't actually take place until May sometime, isn't it?
At least it will have to wait for the government to announce a specific by-election date. But so far, there has been no decision about the date has been made yet. Yeah. But on your point about passing the torch, whether to pass the torch, not only the chairmanship, but also the electoral seat. I think Raymond Wong did tell the reporters this week. He said that he is willing actually to not to run the election and to let Andrew To to run for him. But when the reporters asked Andrew To, he said that he's more interested in the Kowloon East, his own base, rather than the Kowloon West. So, but Raymond did tell the reporters that he's willing to give up his seat for Andrew. But Andrew mentioned that it's the Kowloon East seats that he's interested more, because that was his base after all. So there was that sort of things going on in the media reporting about their thoughts.
Yeah. And have you heard anything, Ken, about any of the two Civic Party lawmakers, or are they intending to run again or anything? Have you? Hasn't been much.
I think they haven't made the decision yet. I think until I think usually during one of the election, even though people knows how and who will run for it, but they won't announce it until the very last minute of it. But as I said before, logically we have to get as many votes as we can. Right, so this is the problem. So you cannot say that we got 20% of people come out to vote and then we win the game, right? We need to have 50% of vote. So I do believe that we should have a very rational thoughts and debate and a lot of discussion internally, in terms of getting the best, quantity of vote.
And as you can see, Long Hair was my guest yesterday in my own radio show.
Right.
And we were discussing a little bit about that question as well. And for a long time, since the beginning of the whole de facto referendum issue, Long Hair has told me that yesterday on air that he would like Martin Lee to take part in the election. He said it was his idea to first thinking about to get Martin Lee to run in the de facto referendum. And OGU actually this past weekend also tried to convince Martin Lee to run, but Martin Lee wasn't interested at all, and his argument was that, as Ken mentioned a bit earlier, that this is after all a referendum. No matter who ran, this should be the same. And after all, he thought that if he decided to run, this sort of sidetracked or diluted the referendum question, because you're sort of adding the human element in it. The charisma element. So he thought that no matter who ran, it should be the same, because it's a referendum and the person factor shouldn't matter that much.
So Matt, do you think? But what do you think in terms of like result-oriented way? Like, for example, if you send someone out who most of the public don't know, 99% don't know who that guy is. If you put them out there, it's theoretically, of course, it fits the matter. But do you think they are going to win a high vote?
That's a good question. If you've got no other candidate, if there aren't any opposition candidates, you can do it and quite safely win, can't you, actually? So, if one of the political groups wanted to, put through a talented rising star who, might be well known within, younger person within the Civic Party or LSD, then it could be a good opportunity to do it, and a way of, and obviously once they became, elected, they would become, well known and so on. I'm a great believer that if a talented person is good enough, then why not put them forward, irrespective of whether they're well known or not? That, just as they're well known, that doesn't really matter. I would say. And I see no problem with that. I think, but I think perhaps we ought to move on a bit and talk a bit about because Ken and I actually went to the AGM. Another bit of interesting news, actually, to tell listeners about the League of Social Democrats is that they had once a year they had their annual general meeting, and it was a few days ago on Sunday, and Ken and I went along. And that was Andrew became elected as the chairman. Perhaps just could you tell the listeners about the how it worked out and what happened and the votes and so on?
I think the votes was I couldn't remember that well. 97 agree and 37 disagree and 10 votes were abstain.
Right. Yeah. So he won with a pretty big majority. People supporting, and I was surprised that there was a pretty big turnout in the hall, wasn't there, in Corso Bay? Yeah. There was 100 or 150.
144 votes. I think
so there must have been
150 people.
That's true, 150 people. So there was quite a big turnout, and obviously, and another thing that I noticed, and it was reported that the media the next day made quite a big issue of it, is the age of the exco within the League of Social Democrats. The average age is 34. And I looked at because they were all sitting up on the stage, weren't they? Yeah. The whole of the LSD exco group, and that I thought, God, they all look young. But all but one was male, though. Actually, that was there was one young woman actually, and it was a shame. Perhaps there wasn't more women and so on. But in terms of the result, obviously, within the League of Social Democrats, there are different factions and so on, aren't they? I don't quite know how it was decided and so on. Because in the end, it was decided that just Andrew decided to run and no one else decided to run. Presumably because they thought they couldn't beat him, and fundamentally, most people supported them. But in some ways, do you feel that perhaps it would have been better if one or two or three others did run, and just to show that, it would be, there's sort of a more sort of naturally democratic system. Do you sort of mean? It's always when there's only one person in an election, it kind of it would have looked better in some ways for Andrew and the whole group if there had been a few others. Do you sort of mean?
But on the other hand, unlike the electoral